Hello everyone and welcome to your Chem 113 review on Bohr's model of the atom. My name is Jason and I work for the ASU Tutoring Centers. So Niels Bohr, or Niels Bohr, I don't know how you pronounce his first name. He was a Danish chemist and physicist from the early 1900s, and he made a lot of speculations on exactly what an atom is, and a lot of his speculations were very instrumental to our current understanding of what an atom looks like. He very famously has three core postulates in defining what an atom is. And we're going to go over what those are today. And we're also going to discuss whether those postulates are correct with our current understanding of how an atom looks. So his first one, he says that electrons orbit the nucleus at a fixed radii from the center. So similar to like you have the sun and you have, the planets that orbit the sun. This was his idea of what an atom looked like. You had your nucleus and you had the electrons in their various orbits kind of orbiting around the sun at this sort of fixed radius. And these different radii, they correspond to sort of different quantized energy levels. Quantized is a very fancy term, but it essentially just means like a fixed amount. So instead of being on a spectrum like light is on the ultraviolet spectrum, right? The visible light blends into ultraviolet, blends into all the other types of light. It's on a spectrum. These are quantized, which means they're fixed. It's sort of like numbers, right? Like the number, the integers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you look at just the integers like that, there are spaces between them. They are clearly defined. They don't exist on a spectrum. So that was his big thing with electrons. They had a fixed radius, and this fixed radius corresponded to these sort of quantized energy levels, which, if you remember from our discussion on electron configuration, we realize that quantized energy levels is a thing that we currently agree with. We agree with the fact that there are discrete energy levels that electrons correspond to. However, to our current understanding, we don't believe electrons orbit the nucleus at a fixed radius. Instead, we have these sort of regions, these orbitals, which we've talked about before, where electrons can exist in. So if here's your nucleus, for instance, a p orbital, remember we had like s, p, d, and f? A p orbital looks something like this. And what essentially we mean by a p orbital, an electron existing in a p orbital, we essentially mean that there's about I don't know the actual percentage, but there's like a 99.9% chance that if you take a snapshot of your atom at any point in time, the electron corresponding to this energy level will be within this region. That's what we mean by orbitals. So we can sort of model where we expect the electrons to exist. However, this is definitely not a fixed radius, right? The electron could exist down here. It could exist over there. It could exist over there. In rare cases, it can be even outside of its own orbital. So electrons definitely don't, to our current understanding, exist in these fixed radii about a nucleus. Rather, they exist in these sort of like probability regions where they have like a high probability of occurring within this region. Okay, so his first postulate was kind of correct. He had the quantized energy part right. I'll include that because that's an important part of his first postulate. That electrons correspond to quantized energy levels. So this part was correct. We currently agree with that. But this part we no longer agree with. We don't think they orbit at fixed radii. We instead think they exist within these like probability orbitals. Okay, second postulate. Electrons have specific fixed energy levels depending on the orbit they are in. The electron will not radiate energy, keeping it from spiraling into the center of the atom. So it's very similar to this concept up here. The big takeaway for his part 1 was that they orbit at a fixed radii. The big takeaway for this part 2 is that electrons have specific fixed radii. Oh, sorry, I'm rewriting the first one. Have specific fixed energy levels. Depending on the orbit they are in. Okay, so this first one's saying, like, depending on the orbit, depending on the energy levels, they exist within certain orbits, and within these certain orbits, they have a certain fixed sort of energy level. So it's sort of like the converse to the statement, the other side of the statement. And this, again, is something that we agree with. They have certain energy levels depending on what orbital they are in. But again, the orbitals he talks about are sort of like circular fixed radii orbitals, whereas the orbitals we talk about are these probabilistic regions around the nucleus where we think the electron will live. And part 3, it says the only ways electrons can absorb or emit energy is by changing from one energy state to another. Electrons can only change energy by changing orbits. So an electron can only absorb or release energy by changing orbits, and this is still something that we in fact agree with today. And we did talk about that in previous videos. As you go from one energy level to another, like you fall down an energy level or you go up an energy level, that typically corresponds to the release or absorbance of a photon, an energy packet, right? So yeah. So for the most part, I mean, most of Bohr's postulates are considered true to today. We still believe in them. That's why they're so important and fundamental to chemistry. The only thing that we disagree with his understanding at the time is that they are at a fixed radii. We no longer believe that. But for the most part, Bohr's model is correct to our current modern day standards. Pretty interesting stuff. Back in the early 1900s, over 100 years ago. All right, well, thank you for watching. As I mentioned, I work for the tutoring centers on campus. If you want more information about the free tutoring resources available on all 4 major ASU campuses and online, please check out tutoring.asu.edu/content/tutor-search. If you go there, you'll be able to find a specific tutor on your campus or online that'll be able to help you with your specific class. So please, please, please check it out. 100% free for you. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.